I had just finished splitting the last package of instant ramen between my two kids when my stomach gave a loud, painful growl. I quickly turned on the kitchen tap and drank 2 large glasses of cold water to fool my body into thinking it was full. I thought I was alone in the kitchen, but when I turned around, my 72-year-old grandfather, Colonel Arthur Vance, was standing in the doorway, tears welling up in his eyes. He looked at the empty pot on the stove, then at the single cup of tap water in my hand. His voice cracked with genuine confusion and grief when he asked, "Mara, why didn't you tell us you were struggling? Wasn't $300,000 a year enough from your service?" I didn't say a single word. I simply unlocked my phone, opened my military credit union app and turned the screen toward him. "My name is Mara Hayes. I'm 28 years old, a former military specialist, and a single mother doing everything in my power to raise my 6-year-old son, Leo, and 4-year-old daughter, Chloe." At the dining table, Leo and Chloe were laughing, dividing a single bowl of noodles between their small plastic plates. They had no idea that was the last food left in the pantry. When my stomach let out a hollow, aching growl, I quickly turned my back, filling a tall glass with tap water to choke down the hunger before my kids could notice. "Mara," a voice whispered from the doorway. I jumped, nearly spilling the water. Standing there was my 72-year-old grandfather, Colonel Arthur Vance. His weathered face was drawn tight, his eyes red and brimming with disbelief. He looked at the spotless, empty stove, then at the single cup of tap water gripped tightly in my knuckles. "Why didn't you tell us you were struggling?" His voice broke with a mixture of grief and confusion. "Wasn't $300,000 a year enough from your service?" I didn't offer a hollow excuse and I didn't defend my pride. Without a single word, I unlocked my phone, opened my military credit union app and handed the screen over to him. His eyes scanned the line item. An available balance of $318,450.22. Right beside it flashed a glaring, bold red banner. "Account restricted, Pentagon administrative hold." Arthur's eyes darted across the illuminated screen, trying to make sense of the contradictory numbers glowing in the dim kitchen light. To understand why $300,000 was locked away behind a federal firewall, you had to understand what I'd spent the last 4 years of my life doing. I was an advanced logistics and tactical communications specialist for an elite rapid response unit. My job wasn't fought in standard trenches. It took place inside secure server rooms, mobile operations centers and forward operating zones where entire supply chains and mission-critical data had to move without leaving a digital footprint. Because of the specialized technical skills and extreme operational hazards involved, the Department of Defense compensated us through high-tier service pay, hazardous duty stipends and classified performance bonuses. On paper, I was making an extraordinary living. The compensation package was designed to ensure that when our service term concluded, our families would be financially secure for life. But there was a catch. One governed strictly by Title 10 security mandates. 18 months ago, I was pulled into a high-priority black budget deployment overseas. The mission parameters required total, unbroken operational silence. No personal communication devices, no civilian banking transactions, and no outward digital activity that could track back to our base station. As part of standard federal counterintelligence protocols, our personal and military financial accounts were placed under a complete administrative freeze. Every single cent earned, base salary, deployment pay, hazard allowances, was routed directly into a secure escrow reserve. The strict protocol stated that upon the mission's conclusion and our subsequent honorable discharge debriefing, the security lock would lift automatically within 72 hours. I completed my tour. I signed my exit debriefs. I brought my children home to start our new life. But 72 hours turned into 2 weeks, and 2 weeks quietly turned into 4 grueling months. When you leave the uniform behind, the civilian world doesn't pause while the military sorts out its red tape. The rent on our small 2-bedroom rental was due on the 1st of every month. Utility companies didn't accept pending government debriefings as currency, and 2 growing children needed fresh milk, warm coats, and shoes that actually fit their feet. I had entered the civilian transition with modest personal cash reserves, but life tore through those savings faster than I could have ever anticipated. Moving expenses, security deposits, and basic household setups rapidly depleted whatever ready money I had left. Within 90 days, my checking account shrank from thousands to hundreds and finally down to double digits. The logical choice for most people would have been to ask for help. My grandfather, Arthur, lived only a few miles away on a modest military pension, and my extended family always assumed I was thriving. But military service instills a fierce, stubborn pride in your bones. I had survived hostile environments and high-pressure operational theaters, admitting to my family that I couldn't afford groceries while technically having hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in a frozen account felt like an unbearable failure. So I carried the weight entirely in silence. I sold off my civilian electronics, took up small freelance data tasks at night when the kids were asleep, and rationed every single scrap of food in the kitchen. If there was only enough meat or vegetables for one meal, it went straight to Leo and Chloe. I convinced myself that a cup of warm water and plain black coffee were plenty to keep me going through the day. To the outside world, I was a decorated veteran with a prosperous future. Inside my own home, I was quietly starving. Arthur stared at the glowing red hold notice on my phone, his expression shifting from raw disbelief to cold, focused indignation. He wasn't just my grandfather. He was a retired infantry colonel who spent 34 years navigating the rigid machinery of the armed forces. He recognized the specific Department of Defense verification code stamped across the screen, and he knew exactly what it meant. "They never processed your final clearance ticket," Arthur said, his voice dropping into the calm, authoritative tone he used when taking command of a tactical situation. "You've been trapped in a digital holding queue." He didn't waste time asking why I hadn't come to him sooner. There was no room for judgment when his granddaughter was going hungry. He immediately pulled out his own phone, flipped through a leather-bound address book he always kept in his breast pocket, and began dialing numbers he hadn't called in years. Within minutes, Arthur had reconnected with former personnel officers and regional liaison contacts within the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. Standing in my small living room, pacing with military posture, he demanded answers with the unyielding persistence only a seasoned senior officer could muster. He recited my service ID, unit detachment codes, and deployment timestamps, refusing to be passed around automated switchboards. What he uncovered after 45 minutes of fierce inquiries made my stomach clench with frustration. When my unit rotated out of the operational theater, a routine administrative overhaul at the Central Processing Depot had backlogged thousands of classified records. My digital discharge portfolio had been marked as pending manual review by an overworked civilian contractor, effectively freezing the automated payout trigger. The system hadn't failed because of misconduct or security violations. It had failed because a solitary checkbox had been overlooked on a government server hundreds of miles away. Arthur hung up the phone, grabbed his car keys off the counter and looked directly at me. "Get your boots on, Mara," he said firmly. "We're going to fix this right now." The drive to the Regional Military Administrative Command Center took 45 minutes, but the silence inside Arthur's truck felt heavy with years of accumulated exhaustion. When we walked through the heavy double doors of the Federal Annex, the air smelled of stale coffee, industrial floor wax, and endless paper files. We approached the front intake desk where a civilian liaison officer sat, casually flipping through a stack of folders. I recognized him immediately. Mr. Henderson, the exact administrator I had spoken to on the phone 3 separate times over the past 4 months. Before I could speak, Henderson glanced up, adjusted his reading glasses and gave an exasperated sigh. "Ma'am, I already told you over the helpline, classified escrow releases follow a standard queue. Take 6 to 8 months for manual reviews. You just have to wait your turn like everyone else." Before the dismissive words could even settle in the air, Arthur stepped forward. The sheer gravity of his presence made the clerk freeze mid-sentence. "Son, you are looking at a decorated specialist who just completed an 18-month classified detachment." Arthur's voice was low, gravelly, and cut through the room like a blade. "She fulfilled every duty required by her country, while your office let her file sit untouched in a digital holding bin. You will not tell her to wait 6 months while her children go without." Arthur reached into his coat and slammed down a thick manila folder containing my complete deployment log, signed exit authorizations, and a handwritten direct contact memorandum from the regional division commander. "Get your duty officer out here right now," Arthur ordered, fixing Henderson with a look that brooked no argument. "Or my next phone call is going straight to the Inspector General's office." The clerk swallowed hard, the arrogance vanishing instantly from his face, and scrambled backward toward the inner command offices. Less than 2 minutes later, the heavy door behind the desk swung open, and Major Davis, the facility's senior commanding officer, walked into the waiting area. The moment he spotted Arthur, his posture snapped to attention, recognizing the retired colonel from regional division briefings years prior. "Colonel Vance," Major Davis said, extending a hand before turning his attention toward me. "What's the situation here?" Arthur didn't mince words. He pointed directly to my records on the desk. "Major, Specialist Mara Hayes completed an 18-month classified detachment under Title 10 orders. Her post-mission debrief was signed and filed 4 months ago, yet her compensation escrow has been locked behind an unassigned administrative hold due to a processing backlog at this desk." Major Davis took the folder, pulled a master terminal keyboard across the counter, and began entering my service numbers into the Central Department of Defense ledger. As line after line of encrypted data populated the monitor, the Major's brow furrowed in visible disbelief. "The exit debrief was verified in the system 16 weeks ago," Major Davis muttered, shaking his head. "The automated release script failed to trigger simply because the final sign-off ticket was never archived into the regional queue." He looked up at me, his expression full of sincere remorse. "Specialist, I apologize on behalf of this command. This was an unconscionable clerical oversight." With a few decisive keystrokes, the Major applied his executive command override code. "Overriding security hold now," he said, pressing the final execution key. Almost instantaneously, my phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. The banking app refreshed automatically on the screen. The glaring red banner that had haunted me for 4 months vanished. Right at the top of the interface, the full balance glowed bright green. $318,450.22. Available immediately. A heavy, suffocating weight that had pressed down on my chest for months completely shattered. Beside me, Arthur placed a warm, steady hand on my shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. The silent battle was finally won. That evening, the heavy cloud of survival mode that had hung over our home for months finally dissolved. The very first thing we did was pile into Arthur's truck and drive straight to a family diner downtown. For the first time in months, I sat at a booth across from my grandfather and watched Leo and Chloe happily devour warm plates of pancakes and fresh fruit, while I ate a full, warm meal without checking the price of a single item on the menu. Over the next 2 weeks, the stability I had fought so hard to secure finally took shape. I transferred the funds out of the federal escrow and immediately opened secure high-yield savings accounts and college trust funds for both of my children. We moved out of our cramped rental and into a bright, quiet home with a spacious backyard where Leo and Chloe could run and play freely. Standing on the back porch on a calm Sunday morning, watching my grandfather teach Leo how to throw a baseball while Chloe chased butterflies across the grass, I realized the most profound lesson of this journey. True strength isn't about suffering in silence or carrying an impossible burden just to protect your pride. I had survived classified deployments and high-stakes operations across the globe, but the greatest security I had ever known didn't come from a bank balance or a military rank. It came from family. The people who stand in your corner, refuse to let you fall, and remind you that you never have to fight your battles alone. As the morning sun broke through the trees, I took a deep, clear breath, knowing that our hardest days were finally behind us.